Upon first glance at the state of the banana patch in Serendipity, a question that almost always forms in people's minds is why? Why did I let it get like this? I personally find this question to be quite fair, as I would probably wonder the same thing myself if I wasn't the one responsible for the current fiasco. However, in order to answer this question, I must take you back 8 months to October. According to the calendar, fall was just around the corner, and if it had been 2 years prior, I would have believed it. The days were still quite long and hot in Serendipity. However, the extreme heat that once felt unbearable was becoming somewhat tolerable. All the plants in Serendipity approved of the current weather conditions, and this was clear as I watched them jump atop trellises and swing from post to post. Most days, it was quite difficult to walk through the garden pathways without running into a tendril or spider web. Realistically, the outcome of coming into contact with either sent shivers down my spine and a curdling shriek out of my throat. Though it was not an ideal way to enjoy any length of time in the garden, I was fairly used to it and would usually wait longer before trying to tame the vines into some form of order. However, this arrangement would not work because I had offered to host a small and private quinceañera in Serendipity for my little sister. This wasn't the original plan, but sometimes things can't go according to plan, and learning how to pivot becomes a very useful skill. In fact, most gardeners are familiar with this skill, especially in their early days. In any case, I didn't have a lot of time to prepare Serendipity, along with all the other tasks that go into planning, decorating, cooking for, and hosting such a special event like a quinceañera. Luckily, I wasn't doing it alone. My siblings and I pitched in together to buy the necessary supplies and make our own decorations to create a beautiful day for a very special girl. The budget wasn't very much, but I'd like to believe that our upbringing has made us into a bunch of very resourceful and creative individuals. Maybe we couldn't afford to buy a magical night, but we could certainly make one. Up until this point, life had been chucking a basket full of lemons at us. We were slammed with misery after misery, and it was a lot to go through mentally and emotionally. I think we all needed a break, and my youngest sister certainly deserved one. I knew that a quinceañera wouldn't take away any of the pain or hurt she was going through, but it could show her how loved she was, and despite all the pain she was experiencing at such a young age, there would, without doubt, still be an abundance of happy, magical moments in her life. Growing up, quinceañeras were one of the biggest moments in our lives. Although we didn't have extensive budgets to throw a lavish party, my mom always worked really hard to figure out a way to give us a beautiful experience. For my own quince, we rented a small salon to host a dinner, but in order to stay within our financial means, I had my quince together with my cousin. My dress was a cream and dusty rose gown with floral accents. It was kind of big and long on me, but we tightened the corset as much as we could to make it work. We picked it up at a small boutique and had gotten it at a great price because it was discounted. I felt like a princess in it. I don't remember how the salon was decorated very clearly, but I do remember standing in my aunt's living room watching her iron out pink fabric. She was always very crafty, and I want to say she was the one who hemmed all the tablecloths, though I don't remember too well. For my other sister's quinceañera, I was in charge of decorating our backyard where her dinner party was hosted. For weeks, my mother, sister, and I worked together to string flowers into strands that draped above the tables. My mom was so stressed out, but somehow she managed to cook enough food for everyone who celebrated with us. Now, my youngest sister was weeks away from turning 15 years old, but my mom wasn't here to guide us through this process. I didn't know how we were going to pull this off, but I was certain that nothing would be able to stop us from giving our little sister a magical night like my mom would have done. The garden was small but beautiful. It would make a perfect location for a private party. A few days before the party was to take place, my siblings came over and together we worked on cleaning up Serendipity. Spent plants were chopped down, paths were cleared, floors were swept, and by the time we were done, Serendipity was breathtaking. The only problem was we were left with a huge pile of garden clippings and nowhere to put them. Bulk trash wouldn't come again for another few months, and the trash cans were already full. In that moment, I had to think quick because there was still so much work to do inside the house to prepare for the big day. As my siblings waited for my instructions on where to place all the garden clippings, a light bulb flickered in my brain. I say flickered because I associate bright light bulbs atop someone's head with good ideas. This one felt like a good idea, mostly because it was the only idea that came to mind at the moment. Just put it where the bananas are and use it as mulch. I didn't think much of it, but nature has a way of turning small decisions into something much, much bigger. These words would haunt me for years to come. Most of the clippings from that day were more than just clippings, so I spent some time cutting things down into smaller pieces so they would fit around the bananas better. However, the pieces that remained were still quite large, much larger than I usually left them. But time was running out, and I figured I would take care of it later, after the party. Over the next few days, any lingering thoughts about the mulch surrounding the banana plants faded away. Some days, I stayed up until the late hours of the night with my sister, working on projects for the quinceañera. Friends played in the background as she sculpted miniature trees out of black wire we found in the masonry section of our hardware store. Then she cut petals out of tissue paper and created pink canopies for whimsical centerpieces. The last 2 to 3 days leading up to the party were some of the most stressful moments as we rushed to finish up some last touches. The evening of the small party was truly a magical sight to see. Arch Rose Claire was much younger then, so the arches weren't as full as they are today. In the gardening world, there's a saying that the first year plants sleep, the second they creep, and the third they leap. My mom's Don Juan climbing roses were still in their creeping stage, so that trellis was a little bare as well. Fortunately, my mother-in-law called me one day to let me know she had boxes of different faux flowers that she had saved up over the years. The flowers themselves were all different colors and styles, so we went for more of a dreamy fairytale look by weaving them in and out of trellises. Others were tied to jute twine and dangled down over the long dining table. All this was illuminated by the twinkling Christmas lights that we strung over Arch Rose Claire. Meanwhile, on the other side of Serendipity, past Aurora Boulevard and Citrus Lane, something moved. A brown anole crawled through an unknown forest, one that hadn't been there a week ago. It settled onto a burgundy branch beneath Eden's pups, completely still, unaware that it wasn't the only one hiding in this tangled mess. It stood still in that same spot for hours as the party continued underneath Archro's Claire. Eventually, the string lights illuminating Citrus Lane turned off and the voices faded away. The brown anole was in the middle of a tree when its eyes suddenly blinked wide open. It stayed still as a couple of shadows quietly crept their way underneath it. For months, the banana patch sat quietly in the corner of Serendipity. Hold on! For months, the banana patch sat quietly in the corner of Serendipity, just as I had left it. Over time, the pile settled, pressed down by the weight of its own decay. It seemed harmless, just a forgotten heap of garden clippings. Nothing more, or so I thought.